Welcome, everyone, and a special welcome to all of our ISM members, our chapter partners, and guests to today's program, hosted by ISM New Jersey. I'm Kathy Perna, the Executive Director. We would like to hear from you today, so please be sure to ask questions or post any of your comments in the chat area for our speaker today. Today, we will be featuring a special presentation on strategic approaches to staffing challenges in a recession. And our speaker for today is Bill Dorn, who is the Senior Vice President of Product Operations at Corcentric. At this time, I will turn the program over to you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're coming from. As Kathy said, my name is Bill Dorn or William Dorn. You can call me either one, it's fine. I have been with Corcentric for about 5 years. Corcentric is a service provider that provides procurement and finance professionals, managed services, and technology to medium and large businesses. We work very closely with the ISM and particularly ISM New Jersey, since we happen to be headquartered there. So thanks again, Kathy, for having us on board. So I know one of the many titles that was floated for this presentation talked about managing a hybrid workforce, and we certainly are going to talk a little bit about that, but probably in a different context than the term hybrid that's been thrown around in the last few years. And I'm not going to spend a large amount of time talking about whether or not your people should be coming into the office or not. So I apologize if that's what you wanted to hear about. I'll touch upon that probably, but we're going to be talking about a different hybrid workforce, which is really how you can augment and bring the resources into your organization to be successful. So getting started. One second, just to keep an eye on the clock, make sure we can be good on time. I'd like to start with bad news. Recruiting and retaining procurement talent is going to get harder. It's not going to get easier. So it's time to get hard as a group. We really feel, and I think I'll show some context on why I'm saying this. While the last couple of years have certainly been challenging, and you know, there's different portrayals on if it's getting better or not out there, I think the reality is there's a lot of indicators that says that particularly in our industry, supply management and supply chain and procurement, things are going to stay difficult for a while. And the reality is it's a tale as old as time. So if we look at the couple of quotes I found here, we create overall procurement strategies, build mitigation strategies for global supply chain risk, and create commodity-based negotiation strategies. But few departments create a specific workforce planning strategy that addresses talent-related departmental goals and objectives. This was the former president of the ISM Boston from 2022. Now we move over to the right here. Historically, supply management was cost reduction focused. Now people are being tasked with demonstrating how they're driving financial performance, how they're bringing innovation to business, how they manage the risk for the business, how they're using sustainability to protect the brand, so you're protecting the business with your consumer base. The skills that are being required now to be successful aren't the skills that a person 5 years ago had. So this is from Tom Derry, and this is from 2016. So we're talking 6-7 years ago. Tom made a statement that I think is a refreshed and accurate as the statement was 5-6 years ago as it is today. But not only are we talking about kind of an old challenge, we then experienced this thing that was, coined the Great Resignation. 78% of job seekers believe that they can make more money by switching jobs rather than staying put. And 67% of job seekers are planning on quitting their jobs in the next 12 months. This was from a survey last month from JobList. Only about a third of workers who have quit their jobs in the past 2 years have returned to the same industry. This is coming from McKinsey. So what we're seeing here is there are still plans to quit. Workers still feel that more money is a valid reason to go somewhere else. And Worse off is once they leave a particular industry, there is a reluctance to come back to that particular industry. So we are losing a little bit of hope on kind of bringing people back into the workforce that may have left their businesses. But now they're calling it this position of great regret. So in 2022, 50 million workers left their jobs. That's from a United States jobs market report. And a recent survey from Paychex just last month said 8 out of 10 workers actually regret their decision. 90% of the Gen Z regret their decision, and they cite mental health decline and lack of relationships as the two primary reasons for their regret. And there is some regret on leaving particular industry, even though the data shows that employees aren't really willing to go back into those industries again. So we call this the Great Regrets. But it's not getting easy. We've got the other R word, which is recession. So despite a somewhat positive overall outlook, nearly half of all job seekers have some level of concern about the potential recession in 2023, impacting their job security and ability to find a new job. Now, I'm not here to split hairs on whether or not we're actually in a recession or hit a recession. I know there's varying political, economic definitions of those types of things right now, but I think it's fair to say that whether or not we've hit the textbook definition, things are a little bit weird. Some of the data on the right shows that the average unemployment rate, 4.6, is still, historically low. We're still adding 42,000 jobs per month. We're seeing high interest rates, right? So things are not slowing down. So there is a 64% chance by the economic board saying that, Bankrate saying that we are going to hit a recession this year. So what does this all mean to us and to workers? There's a lot of uncertainty, and we are already short-staffed, and now we're entering a period where everybody was competing for the same resources. Now those resources may not be willing to make career changes at this point. So recruiting is actually going to get harder. Even if the workers exist out there to recruit, they're going to be less likely to be hopping jobs as they were in the past. So a little bit of a reality check for us. We did a survey, Core-Centric and the Art of Procurement, which is a wonderful podcast. If you haven't subscribed, it's a great one to look up. But we surveyed 250 procurement leaders about when your procurement team is short on headcount, how would you fill this gap? And nearly 60% of them said, we're going to have to work harder. And obviously, that's not a great answer. 17% said, we're going to accomplish this. There's nothing we can do. We're just not going to be able to do as much as we used to do. And then only about 25% use some combination of we're going to go out there and seek out some external support in the form of freelance contractors or consultants. All this being said, we should have expected this. So Sam Bird from Gartner said there are plenty of articles out there that state what is happening from a data perspective, but they fail to dig a level deeper into why this is happening. This phenomenon has been a long time coming. In fact, we should have expected this. So these frustrations have been mounting for a long time, right? So how do we try to work more strategically, but procurement and supply chain management as a function is typically viewed as tactical. Headcounts and budgets have certainly not kept pace with the demands of what's coming out of procurement. So it's not just a matter of demand in terms of you have to get more product out the door. The actual contributions of a procurement professional or supply chain professional have significantly increased when you factor in logistics and risk management and ESG and everything else. Our headcounts and budgets simply just have not kept pace with all these new responsibilities. How companies have tried to combat that in the past is, a lot of times they hastily selected and implemented technology without really a solid plan on effectively implement that or how they would derive an ROI out of those technologies. So, ultimately, in a way, they're sold a bill of goods. They're sold that a computer system is going to miraculously solve their headcount issue or their particular pain point or something else. And they wind up with maybe a bunch of different point solutions in a business that aren't effectively talking to each other and probably recognizing only a fraction of what they expected to receive as a benefit out of it. And ultimately, there is a lack of advancement opportunities and sometimes a limited ability to make an impact when you're in a supply management role within a business. So it's not essentially the most glamorous career, particularly for some people coming out of college. So how do we go about dealing with the 5 R's I pointed? Recruiting and retention through resignation, regret, and recession. So I asked ChatGPT for help. We all have heard about AI and ChatGPT recently. And I said, how should I handle staffing challenges in a procurement department during a recession? Well, it came back with a very thoughtful, rather textbooky answer. And essentially it said, let's prioritize our essential roles. Let's review our workload distribution. We'll offer training and development. We'll use outsourcing. We'll communicate openly and transparently, and we'll show appreciation and recognition. So yes, I think those are all really good points. Thank you, ChatGPT. But there's not really a lot of actionable information for me there. So I said, how are our jobs going to be impacted in a recession? Well, they said your budgets are going to be reduced, right? We certainly don't want to hear that. We may see reduced demand, right? If people stop buying our goods and services, particularly if inflation keeps happening. We may see supply chain disruptions, nothing unfamiliar to any of us in the last few years. And we're going to see increased pressure. So again, thanks ChatGPT, but you just kind of realigned my expectations that it's going to be a challenging year. So I switched to a different type of AI, and I said, show me what procurement looks like, staffing for procurement looks like in a recession. And this is the artificial intelligence images that it came back with very specifically on the search time. Generate images, procurement staffing in a recession. So I'm not convinced that this is very helpful to me either, but I thought it was a fun exercise and hopefully is keeping you guys awake a little bit because I tend to drown. So in reality, the classics never die. Many of you have probably heard of Peter Kralik. There's the Kralik model. This is 1983. Peter Kralik wrote an article for the Harvard Business Review. We're talking 40 years ago. And a lot of the fundamentals in here really are still in play. We have to insist on stronger cross-functional relationships and more top-level management involvement, right? So we have come a long way as procurement and supply chain management professionals in getting a seat at the table within organizations, but still we've got a long way to go. We're still not, eyed in the views of sales and some of the other groups in the company in terms of the importance to the business. It's often looked like as a cost center still. We need to encourage flexibility and entrepreneurship within the constraints of the overall corporate structure. A lot of times businesses tend to be weak at that. We're so insistent to put processes and controls in place that sometimes those themselves can be detrimental to the value that procurement or supply chain management could produce. We want to upgrade the skills and experiences required of the key purchasing people, certainly. And we want to shift their roles to be more strategic versus tactical. And we want to foster a constructive atmosphere and attitude among purchasing staff before undertaking any radical staff changes. So these are 4 things, again, written 40 years ago, and I still think they're highly applicable today. So we've got key questions that need to be answered as procurement professionals. These are probably not unfamiliar to many of you. Do I have a centralized or a decentralized procurement function? Should I be hiring generalists or specialists? Should I be proactive in conducting spend analyses and opportunity assessment reports and creating wave plans on areas that we can go out and target savings within our business? Or should I be reacting to the immediate needs of the business and the shifting market conditions that we continue to see? Should I be enforcing or enabling? Should I be putting processes and controls in place, or should I be enabling people to work swifter and more cost effectively and faster and be innovative? Do I need commodity subject matter expertise, or do I need general good business acumen? So when we look at world-class procurement organizations, we kind of fall back on that old people, process, technology type. You need people. You need people for the transactional side of things, or the downstream procurement. These are the people that are creating purchase order requisitions and executing purchase orders. They're handling the transactional operational aspects of the business. We need good people for the strategic side of things, looking at strategic sourcing and overall risk mitigation plans and things like that. You need specialty resources, whether they're individuals that are highly focused on logistics or materials distribution or inventory management or a particular commodity. You need some specialty in your people. You have processes. You have processes in place to maximize your investments in both the people and the technologies that you buy. You have technology in place for compliance to do things to make sure that your business is following the rules. You put processes in place for predictability and repeatability. We need technology for automation, to be more cost effective, again, for compliance, to make sure that we're eliminating maverick buying and those sort of things. And then we also need it for visibility and future direction. What are my projections and what do I need to do to overcome? So when we look at building our procurement organizations, it's very easy to kind of fall back on these fundamentals of people, process, technology. I would suggest, though, that we need to bring in a couple more areas. The first being relationships and the second being information. So relationships is different than people. It's certainly part of people, but it is different. We have relationships with suppliers. We have relationships with customers. And then we have relationships within our own company. And these all play as critical of a role as people, process, and technology. We also have information. So we have lots of data as businesses, but data itself is not information. How do we convert data from the past, what we've done in the past, into lessons learned? How do we leverage that into opportunities on how we should shape our future? And what are some other sources of information that we can get that would help us better outside of just our own learning experiences? So what this all means is, I've double clicked, correct here. We're shifting from this period that the media coined quiet quitting into one that the media has termed quiet hiring. So what is quiet quitting? First off, quiet quitting was essentially over the last 2 years, it was in a remote workforce situation. It was people giving it way less than their all. In some cases, a lot of statistics are coming out that this is because they had maybe 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, and they could get away with doing the absolute bare minimum. In other cases, it was people who were just highly dissatisfied with their positions and were looking for exit plans. In other cases, people were leaning way too heavily on the life side of the work-life balance and taking advantage of employers. Whatever the reasons were, this was coined quiet quitting, where you're not overtly leaving your job, you're kind of making your job force you to leave. There's now been this shift in relatively new term called quiet hiring. And the idea behind it, I think, is well summarized by Emily Rosenfeld from Gartner. She said, quiet hiring is when an organization acquires new skills without actually hiring new full-time employees. There's a lot of different ways companies are going about achieving this. The first is repurposing existing workforce. Now, this is a pretty novel and interesting concept. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. On one particular example, I actually have a colleague that's a procurement professional in a medical dispensary in Chicago. And it's a rather large, prosperous business, but they are having significant staffing issues in the packaging and line floor operations. And what they've actually done within their business is they've offered voluntarily rotational programs to the office workers, including procurement. So right now, this colleague of mine is typically a procurement professional. He's actually working in the packaging line of a marijuana distribution company right now. And it's only a 1 week thing. It serves the purpose for that business to, overcome some short-term staffing challenges they have. But he's actually learning a lot from the process. And so in the kind of conversations from him, he was saying he was picking up on some of the frustrations around the materials that they were buying, and the pros and cons of kind of some of the decisions that are made in the back office function that aren't necessarily always translated back from the workforce at the end line. So that's an interesting example, but let's face it, most companies are not going to be chomping at the bit to jump into a forklift down on the shop floor. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we can all of a sudden take someone out of, let's say, the accounting department and make them a temporary procurement person for several weeks. The skills are not necessarily that easily transferable. I would also say that we need to take an ethical approach to that employee development. We can't just say that we've decided you no longer work in accounting, you work in procurement. It needs to be something that the employees want to go after themselves. So that means that we're going to lay a lot more effort into using things like contractors for short-term labor, and otherwise finding ways not to put new hires on our books. All of that is kind of loosely bundled up to this thing called quality hiring. So I wanted to introduce a different type of hybrid workforce, right? So I mentioned before, there's the almost necessity nowadays to allow people to work in the office and outside of the office, and that's often called hybrid. But what I wanted to talk about was a hybrid partner. So that's my little attempt at a hybrid creature right there. It's my half horse, half computer guy. Again, something to break it up for you. But what is a hybrid partner? So it's really the expansion of managed service providers. Managed service providers have existed for decades, primarily in the areas of IT, back office support, call centers, customer support centers, those types of things. So the concept of having, a staff augmentation model that is an IT help desk for your organization is very old. However, if we look at that in the procurement and supply chain and risk management space, it hasn't been as flexible as those models. Typically, there's been two primary approaches to managed service providers. The first was an all or nothing outsourcing of the function. It was your big business process outsourcing, your big BPOs, typically in low-cost countries, that wanted to come in and completely displace 90% of your procurement under the guise that it's a back office function and it's commoditized. Alternatively, you had typically much more expensive resources that would come in, but they would be focused on project-based initiatives. They would be coming in specifically to stand up a capital expenditure or specifically to solve a business process challenge within your business, or specifically come in to implement a particular procurement system, for example, or a strategy for your warehousing locations and logistics distribution network. And those were project-based, and ultimately the projects conclude and those resources leave you never to be seen again until the next time your boss's boss's boss brings them back. But also in both of those models, traditionally, those companies would come in and say, look, you also need technology, you need software, you need subscriptions to data sources, and you can either buy them from us, we'll resell them to you, but you also need somebody to implement us. And guess what? That's another project. We happen to have a group here that can handle that project for you as well. And the dollar signs rack up, the scoping of these gets complex and everything else. So that shifts into what the hybrid models are looking like today. A hybrid partner model retains your talented team while adding experienced professionals, information, and technology to do the required work to keep your business running and growing. So if anybody watches The Office, that's the reference down there in the corner there. But what does that mean? That means that in your typical business, there's a lot of resources that your team has. You have data and analytics, you have your strategic employees on what I would consider the upstream procurement or upstream supply chain lifecycle. You have compliance and controls in place. You have accounting or ERP systems. So you have SAP, you have Oracle, you have JD Edwards, Workday, et cetera, et cetera. You have in-house process and workflows and controls. You have key category managers. You might be subscribing to some data sources. You might be buying some benchmark analysis from companies like Gartner. You've got buyers in procurement or downstream transactional workforce. You've got key supplier relationship managers. You might be doing some things in environmental sustainability and governance. So you've got a lot of these components within your business. What the new hybrid model allows you to do is bring in much, much more. So certainly you're going to have some overlap. Both things are going to have data and analytics, but they're different sets of data and analytics. You have your in-house data and analytics around things that you've done in the past. They're going to bring in the experiences that they have from other businesses and other customers. They're going to bring in source to pay technologies or order to cash technologies. They might have exposure to preferred pricing or group purchasing or group buying pricing that you might not have access to. They're going to have additional transactional resources, whether that's on the buying side or the AP processing side. They're going to be able to do supplier enrichment or master data management cleanup for you. Things that you individually would probably have to go out and form individual SOWs and hire a business for, they can bring to the table. Benchmark data, training resources, compliance monitoring, advisory and transformation solutions, AI and ML. So, they can bring in specialized tools to support the procurement lifecycle. Working capital could particular thing. But the biggest two, I would say, is they're bringing more time to the equation, more resource to the equation, and what I coined surge staffing. So one of the biggest challenges for anybody is predicting what your demand is going to be. Your demand right now might be seasonal, and you guys are really, really struggling for the next 3 to 6 months, or it might be annual, or it may be really slow right now, and you don't want to go out and hire, but it could pick up very, very big in the summertime. So surge staffing would really put that flexing up and down of resource demand onto your business partner to manage, not on you. That enables you to become a super team. So you're going to have access to subject matters on experts on a demand. So again, the legacy model, your business kind of needed to figure out exactly what I needed before I go out and hire a consulting firm or a BPO or something like that. With a hybrid firm, you can go out with business objectives and say, look, this is what I'm looking to accomplish within my business. And during the engagement that we work together, you're going to flex and bring in the resources and the subject matter experts for the particular needs I have at any given time, whether that's a category manager or that's a logistics specialist or someone that's experienced in standing up ESG programs or diversity spend programs or needs to put a training program in place to help elevate some of your individuals. You can rely on that partner to bring those resources in, work on that initiative, and then flex back out of the equation and pivot back in some other resources so that you can work on your next thing. They're going to bring third-party data, they're going to bring access to a lot more information, and they're essentially going to make you much more efficient because a lot of the work that you don't have the bandwidth to do yourself, you outsource onto the tactical resources within that team. Ultimately, this model allows you to scale up and down on demand. You're going to learn the lessons through somebody else's experience. So other customers of theirs, other experiences of the consultants and the line workers that are actually supporting these things are being able to bring more to the table. They're going to be able to bring more strategic thinking to the table, not just tactical thinking as well. And they're also going to be able to bring in things like AI and ML. So, if you wanted to enable artificial intelligence and machine learning into your business processes, there's huge benefits. But those are very, very challenging projects just to get your arms around. If you're going about that solo, you're starting from nothing. You're starting from a cool webinar you attended or an article that you read. Then you have to go out and figure out, well, what is this thing? Who are the players in the market? How does it actually get enabled? How do I buy it? How do I test it? That in itself becomes a huge project. When you have it the right business partner, you can just ask them, hey, what has been successful for other businesses that have this challenge? And they might be able to walk you right into an appropriate answer. So that's going to all allow you to focus on what's important. It's going to reduce the HR burden. So if nothing else, you as managers are not going to be spending a ton of time hiring and training resources. Instead, you can focus on keeping your strategic resources and your key resources happy with your organization and allowing them career development and everything else. You're going to hopefully see lower number of people leaving your organization as you start to take some of the pressure away from them. They should be a little bit more satisfied and likely to stay in their seats rather than chasing some other position out there that's promising them 11% more for their money. And ultimately, it's going to allow you to focus on the supply management and procurement, not focus on staffing issues and forecasting and everything else. So how do you justify the expense? I know you're all saying like, this is well and good, but my company is never going to go out and sign off on this. Well, they may. And the reason is you're going to have to really put it on that hybrid partner to justify the return on investment. And the right partner will do this for you. So first, you're going to go after getting the savings, right? So there's the soft costs. They're going to help you avoid pitfalls. They're going to help you implement solutions faster, everything else. I think that is the salesperson's dream to get to talk about all of that. But us as procurement professionals are going to want to actually see some solid ROIs on them, right? So certainly they're going to help us with reducing errors and making mistakes and getting to things faster. But they should also come to the table with saying some very definitive things on the ways that they're going to reduce the expenses of your business. So that, of course, would start with, cost reduction and strategic sourcing type exercises. That's just one part of the journey. They're going to have to demonstrate to you both hard dollar and soft dollar savings to your business. The good hybrid partner not only helps with identifying those opportunities, but will actually help with the ongoing change management, supplier management, and compliance that's needed to achieve those results. So many of us have probably worked with your traditional consulting suits that come in. They spend 3 to 6 months in there. They render a report back to management that if you did X, Y, and Z, your business is going to save $3.5 million. And then they go on their way and they bill $1.5 million for their services, saying that they just did a 3X ROI. And the reality is your business never sees that $3.5 million. You're maybe successful at implementing 750,000 of the savings that they identified. So when you're talking to your hybrid partners, you have to put it on them that you want a portion of this to be guaranteed, and the right ones will do that. And they'll actually put the mechanisms for monitoring and compliance and controls and adjustment to assure that you're achieving those savings. As you're talking to his partners, though, be mindful of all the hidden costs. Ask up front about what implementation fees, what licensing fees are you hitting me with? What are the additional costs and upcharges and things like that I need to know about. Be very cautious that they can sometimes bury those in multi-page agreements. But wait, the robots are coming for our jobs. Well, they're not yet. And when they do, who's going to build them? Who's going to install them? Who's going to maintain them? So I did kind of want to leave on this point is robots and AI are going to change your role. They're not going to steal your job. So in 1913, Henry Ford invented the assembly line. And the sentiment at that time was it was going to essentially cause all the unskilled laborers to lose their jobs. In fact, what happened when Henry Ford invented the assembly line? In 1913, Ford went from 14,000 employees to 52,000 employees in a single year. What's more impressive is the wages over doubled. They went from $2.25 to $5 a day, which I wish I got paid that, but still. So not only did this exponentially make the business itself a lot more money, it created tons of jobs. It created a higher class of skilled or unskilled labor and a higher pay for those individuals. So what I would profess as AI is becoming a topic of the day everywhere, and certainly is almost to a degree scary on how quickly it's developing. I think procurement professionals are going to become operational professionals. So managing the operations of your partners, your people, your information, your technology, that's going to become your career. You're going to be an operations professional that has a vertical expertise in supply management. So in summary, recruiting retention's not going to get easier. We have to embrace the quiet hiring. We got to be creative and adaptive about using the workforce within our existing business. We have to make sure that we're ethical about repurposing any of our organizational resources. And we really should be focused on exploring these hybrid partner models, companies that can come in and offer an opportunity for you to flex up and down with your business needs without a ton of constraints around SOWs and named resources, and certainly not complete outsourcing of your business functions. And I think all of us need to start viewing ourselves as operational experts with a procurement or supply chain vertical experience. So with that, just a 2-second plug on Corecentric and ultimately myself. Corecentric, of course, does provide a hybrid partner managed services solution. We provide it to procurement and finance professionals so that businesses can focus on growth, not stress. We offer a one-stop shop for technology, working capital, information, experience, and most importantly, people who care and care about you and your business. I'm Bill Dorn, Senior Vice President of Product Management at Corecentric. I've got about 20-something years, more than I care to admit, in the procurement and supply chain world. Wrote a book on the topic with some of my colleagues. I know some of you have probably met quite a few of them: Joe Kane, Jen Ulrich, Dave Pastore, different experts that I've worked with over the years and continue to remain great friends with. You can find our book on Amazon.com. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy with any questions or concerns that we can talk through.
Sure. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Thank you so much for that. We did have one question. Can you make the slides available to the group that's attending today?
Yes, absolutely. I'm assuming Kathy has everybody's email addresses so we can make that happen.
Okay, yes, definitely. Another question came in. Which business sectors have a high adoption rate of the hybrid partner model?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Surprising. So we've actually seen it be a bit cyclical. And surprisingly, sometimes I find it's industries that on the surface, I would actually not immediately think are the most progressive with procurement and staffing. So I'm seeing huge interest out of the construction markets right now, and distribution markets. And the reason I would say distribution markets, I think certainly are keen to procurement, but they tend to always want to manage it in-house, right? It's somewhat considered to be a core function of the business. But we're seeing that really picking up where they're saying, look, there's just too much demand here, and we need to be able to flex and scale for the particular projects. Construction, I think it's the decentralized and the project-based nature of being in the construction industry, where they could be completely flat next month, and 6 months from now have the largest amount of projects that they've ever seen before as a business. So those are two particularly strong markets that we're seeing, but we have seen it flex in the years. It's been popular in healthcare for a time being, insurance and professional services. So it doesn't really seem that there's one particular vertical that is outpacing the adoption versus elsewhere.
Oh, thank you. We do have one comment in here saying, wonderful presentation, very good overview, and your book is excellent.
Oh, thank you. That must be one of my friends trolling me.
We actually did a Ernie Hernandez actually
Oh,
interviewed the group.
hi, Ernie. How are you?
Remember that?
Thank you.
I think it was, I don't know if it was last year or the year before that, but we did a book review.
Yes.
Let me see. I got a couple questions coming in. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, are the managed partners industry specific, manufacturing services, etc.? Think you are touching on this now. How do they market their services?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there certainly are managed service providers that are industry specific, particularly as you move into, I would say that the three verticals would be manufacturing. You'll see it also in med device, so a subset of manufacturing, as well as the medical pharmaceutical type space. So you will see some specialists playing in there. The reality, though, is in most cases, it's not always necessary, or in many cases, it's probably not necessary to seek out a vertical specific industry. And the reason I would say that, or a vertical specific provider, the reason I would say that is part of the advantage of using the model here is what you're going to try and do with your resources is really develop them on those core businesses that are the core issues that are core to your business. So if you are a manufacturer, you certainly want to still try and bring in your category managers for your raw materials and direct materials. You want to really own that process and certainly get some help in key places, but you're going to really control those core business functions. If you're in the pharmaceutical side of things, you're probably also going to be keeping the directs very close to your chest. But that leaves the rest of the world, the entire indirect side, as well as the automation side of things, whether it's technology based, even dipping down all the way into like accounts payable outsourcing and payments outsourcing, which procurement is now getting their fingers into as well. Those you don't need specialty providers for. So certainly, I think depending on your specific need, you may want to consider it, but generally speaking, the rules of or the work effort that we're all trying to get done is not really all that dissimilar from one vertical to another, with the maybe 20% exception of what is core to your vertical.
Okay, another question came in. Hi, Bill. Thanks for the presentation. Do you see the recruiting retention process passing through a difficult time since many organizations have not finished realizing about their needs and projects, or because they prefer to keep on looking for specialists rather than generalists?
That's a really interesting question. And even myself, we talk about that internally. Short answer is yeah. I think it's going to be continuing to be changed, and I think we are going to see a waffling back and forth of whether or not we look for business acumen experts or generalists, in lack of a better term, or specialists in a particular area. I think probably more important from my perspective is the skill sets, the underlying skill sets. We're going to need people that certainly are very skilled at data analysis and using some of the more modern technologies, whether they're source to pay, order to cash tools, ERP systems is one thing, but I'm really talking about getting into your data analytics tools, your Power BI, the advanced functionalities within Excel, those types of things. I think those are probably more important in a lot of cases than being a super specialist in one really minute area. I think the natural conflict we have with our HR departments, though, is HR wants to put a real tight box around a definition of a role, and then therefore might be eliminating good candidates that you might otherwise want to talk about. I've seen really poorly written job descriptions. Particularly, I now live on the product side of the house, so I design software systems that support procurement and AP professionals. And sometimes, you'll see a spec that's written for a developer, for example, and I'll ask for 7 years of experience in a particular technology, but that technology has only existed for 2 years, right? So I think we have to challenge HR in our hiring. I think these types of models where we have a leveraged partner where, frankly, sometimes we just don't know. We don't know what we're looking for. That's what the challenge is. I need resource, but the resource I need this month might be a data analyst expert. The resource I need next month might be a small parcel expert or a packaging expert. And I think that's why we can start to make the arguments internally that we should lean more heavily on bringing leadership positions into procurement and operational type people that can manage partner type things. I hope I answered the question. There was kind of a lot of different topics.
Thank you so much. If anybody has any other questions, please just, put it in the chat and then we'll get right to it. But I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. I also like to thank you, Bill, and also Wade for helping us set up this program today. And we actually love doing stuff with Corecentric. Very good partner for us, definitely. So at this point, I don't see any more questions. Did you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with everybody?
No, I think my closing thought is good luck to everybody, myself included. We've been in challenging times. I do think that we have all adapted very, very well to this. And I would encourage you, I will likely be at the ISM annual conference this year. I try and go every year. So please say hello if you see me roaming around there. So thank you, Kathy. Thank you all for attending, and certainly feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we'll make sure we get the deck out to you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, at this time, I'm going to close the program, and I want to again thank everybody for joining us today. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.